Right now, somewhere in the world, someone is lighting a cigarette. They flick a lighter. Smoke curls up. It feels like a modern habit, a modern vice, a product of gas stations and vending machines. But the real answer is far stranger. Humans were inhaling burning plants 12,000 years before the pyramids existed, long before tobacco companies, long before rolling papers, long before anyone had a word for addiction. Your ancestors were already doing it. Let's go back. Not to the 1800s, not to the age of sailing ships bringing tobacco to Europe. Further, much further. In 2021, archaeologist Darren Duke was excavating an ancient hearth in the Great Salt Lake Desert of Utah. Buried in the ash, he found something small: charred seeds, wild tobacco seeds. When his team dated them, the results were almost unbelievable. 12,300 years old. That makes it the oldest direct evidence of tobacco use anywhere on Earth. Older than agriculture, older than pottery, older than permanent villages. The people who left those seeds behind were hunter-gatherers, following megafauna across an ice age landscape. And in the middle of that harsh, uncertain existence, they paused. They burned a plant. And they breathed it in. Why would they do that? Here's where the story gets stranger. Wild tobacco doesn't taste good. It's harsh. It's bitter. Unlike the tobacco in a modern cigarette, ancient wild tobacco could contain far higher concentrations of nicotine. So this wasn't a casual habit, picked up for relaxation after a long day of hunting. This was something else. Something with weight. Nicotine does something specific to the human brain. It binds to receptors that normally respond to a natural neurotransmitter called acetylcholine. In doing so, it triggers a flood of dopamine, the same chemical messenger involved in reward, focus, and alertness. In small doses, it sharpens attention. In larger doses, it can produce lightheadedness, altered perception, even visions. For ancient hunter-gatherers, that altered state wasn't recreation. It was function. Anthropologist Johannes Wilbert spent decades studying tobacco use among indigenous groups in South America, and his research revealed something the modern world had almost forgotten. Tobacco wasn't originally a habit, it was a tool. Shamans used concentrated tobacco smoke and sometimes tobacco juice to enter trance states. To communicate, they believed, with spirits, ancestors, and the forces that controlled sickness, weather, and fortune. Picture it. A fire in the dark. A cluster of families huddled close for warmth, and one person breathing in smoke until the world tilts sideways, until visions arrive, until they can speak, they believe, to something beyond the visible world. This wasn't about pleasure, this was about power. The power to heal, the power to predict, the power to explain a universe that offered no other explanations. Thousands of years later, halfway across the world from that Utah desert, the Maya were doing something remarkably similar. Painted pottery from Central America shows gods and rulers holding rolled bundles of tobacco leaves, smoke rising from their mouths in stylized curls. Some of the oldest surviving depictions of smoking anywhere on Earth come from Maya ceramics, dated to roughly 2,000 years ago. In Maya belief, tobacco smoke was a bridge. It carried prayers upward. It carried messages to gods who lived beyond the clouds. Rulers smoked publicly, in front of their people as part of religious ceremony. Priests smoked to communicate with ancestors. And ordinary people smoked in smaller ways to ward off insects, to ease pain, to mark the boundary between the sacred and the everyday. Notice something. Across two completely separate civilizations, separated by thousands of miles and thousands of years with no contact between them, humans arrived at the exact same idea. Burn a plant. Breathe the smoke. Change your mind. Why would something so specific evolve independently again and again? Part of the answer lies in the plant itself. Tobacco is remarkably easy to grow, and it thrives in disturbed soil, the kind of ground humans were already clearing for early farming and campsites. It practically grew alongside early agriculture, almost inviting discovery. And nicotine's effects are immediate. Unlike alcohol, which takes time to ferment, or certain medicinal plants which require preparation and knowledge, tobacco offers a fast, undeniable, repeatable experience. Burn it. Inhale. Feel something happen. For a species already obsessed with cause and effect, that immediacy would have been impossible to ignore. And there's a deeper layer here, one that connects directly to who you are today. Your brain did not evolve in a world with vending machines and convenience stores. It evolved in a world of scarcity, where finding anything that reliably altered your internal state, that reliably shifted your mood, your alertness, or your perception was rare and valuable. Ancient humans weren't chasing addiction. They were chasing reliability. A plant that predictably changed how you felt was almost as valuable as a plant that predictably fed you. That single principle, a substance that reliably alters your internal state, is the same principle sitting inside your coffee, your energy drink, and yes, your cigarette if you smoke one. Here's the twist that changes everything. For nearly all of human history, tobacco was rare, expensive, ceremonial, and controlled. It wasn't something you did constantly all day without thinking. It was something you did occasionally, deliberately, often under the guidance of an elder or a healer. The relationship between humans and tobacco was for thousands of years a relationship of respect and restraint. Everything changed in the last 500 years. When European sailors encountered tobacco in the Americas in the late 1400s and early 1500s, they didn't just discover a plant, they discovered a commodity. Tobacco was shipped back across the Atlantic. It was grown on an industrial scale, first through colonial plantations, later through modern agriculture. It stopped being a ceremony, it became a product, and the plant itself changed too. Cultivated tobacco strains were selectively bred over generations to be smoother, milder, easier to inhale deeply and often. The harsh, vision-inducing wild tobacco your Ice Age ancestors burned in that Utah desert is almost nothing like the cigarette tobacco of today. Modern tobacco was engineered slowly and unintentionally to be consumed constantly rather than ceremonially. This is the counterintuitive part. The ancient version of smoking, wild, harsh, occasional, was arguably far less habit-forming in daily life than the refined, smooth, mass-produced version most people encounter now. Your ancestors 12,000 years ago experienced something closer to a rare, intense ritual. Someone lighting a cigarette on their lunch break today is experiencing something engineered over centuries for repetition. So when you see someone smoking outside an office building, phone in one hand, cigarette in the other, you're watching the final chapter of an extraordinarily long story. A story that began with hunter-gatherers in a desert, huddled around a fire, searching for a way to speak to the unknown. A story that traveled through Maya temples where kings breathed smoke toward the heavens as an offering. A story that crossed an ocean, and along the way, lost almost all of its meaning, keeping only the chemical hook. What hasn't changed across 12,000 years is the brain doing the breathing. The same receptors. The same dopamine surge. The same ancient hunger for something that reliably shifts how the world feels. Researchers today, including neuroscientists studying nicotine's effects on attention and mood regulation, consistently find that the drug taps into reward circuitry that long predates tobacco itself. Circuitry originally shaped by food, water, and social bonding. In other words, tobacco didn't create a new vulnerability in the human brain. It simply found and exploited one that was already ancient. There's another piece of this puzzle that rarely makes it into the history books. Tobacco wasn't only inhaled. Long before rolled cigarettes existed, people chewed it, drank it as a brewed liquid, snorted it as a fine powder, and even used it in enemas during certain Maya and South American rituals. That last method sounds shocking today, almost absurd, but it reveals something important. Ancient cultures weren't fixated on smoking specifically. They were fixated on nicotine, on the altered state itself, and they experimented with every possible way of getting it into the body. Smoking simply turned out to be the fastest, most efficient delivery system. Inhaled smoke reaches the brain in seconds, faster than almost any other method available to a Stone Age or Bronze Age society. Your ancestors may not have understood pharmacology, but through trial, error, and generations of experimentation, they discovered the most direct route to the brain that existed at the time. Consider, too, how tobacco spread once it crossed the Atlantic. Within a single century of European contact, tobacco use had reached ports in Spain, England, the Ottoman Empire, and eventually India, China, and Japan. No other plant in human history spread across the globe that quickly. Historians studying early modern trade routes point to tobacco as one of the fastest adopted substances in recorded history, embraced by royalty and common laborers alike, almost regardless of culture, religion, or geography. Kings smoked it. Sailors smoked it. Physicians for a time even prescribed it, believing it could cure headaches, toothaches, and fatigue. A plant discovered by hunter-gatherers in a desert eventually became so universally desired that entire colonial economies were rebuilt around growing it. That universality is the real clue here. If a habit spreads that fast, across that many unrelated cultures, it usually isn't culture doing the work, it's biology. The human brain, wherever it exists, wired the same way across every continent, responded to nicotine in the same predictable pattern. Attention sharpened, mood lifted briefly. Stress for a moment felt more manageable. That combination is almost irresistible to a species whose daily survival for most of its existence depended on staying alert and staying calm under pressure at the same time. Which brings us back to today, standing outside that office building, cigarette in hand. The setting has changed almost beyond recognition. No fire, no fellow hunters gathered close. No belief that the smoke is carrying a message to the spirit world, and yet, underneath all of that distance, the same basic transaction is happening. A brief engineered escape valve for a nervous system that is almost identical to the one your ancestors carried across an Ice Age landscape 12,000 years ago. The context disappeared. The chemistry never did. So the next time you see smoke curling into the air from a cigarette, from a campfire, from anywhere, consider what you're actually looking at. Not a modern habit. Not a modern vice. A 12,000-year-old conversation between the human brain and a plant that learned, long before science understood why, exactly how to get its attention. Right now, somewhere in the world, someone is lighting a cigarette, and whether they know it or not, they are repeating one of the oldest rituals your species ever performed.